Have you ever heard that story about the pilot Matt Brown?
I haven't, no.
Oh, it's incredible. He was flying at night and his engine just died.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, total engine failure.
That's terrifying.
And you know what saved him?
What's that?
Not some, fire hose of information he crammed in during training,
Hmm.
but deeply ingrained knowledge, the stuff that was almost automatic for him.
Ah, like second nature.
Exactly. It makes you think, right? How much of what we believe about learning
Yeah.
is actually wrong?
It really challenges your assumptions as a learner, doesn't it? I mean, we often just assume more hours studying equals better learning, but
Yeah, yeah.
like you said with Matt Brown, that link isn't always so clear-cut.
It's not a one-to-one thing. So that's why today we're doing a deep dive into Make It Stick, the Science of Successful Learning.
Oh, great book.
And we have Anna with us. She's a professor at University 365 and a total expert on this book.
Thanks for having me.
Anna, it's so good to have you here to kind of help us unpack all this.
I'm happy to be here, excited to dive in with you and everyone listening, and really try to understand the key insights from Make It Stick.
That's exactly our mission today, right? For you listening, it's like, how do we pull out the most impactful learning strategies?
Right.
The stuff you can actually use, whether it's for work, personal stuff, or even academics.
Absolutely. And the great thing about Make It Stick is it challenges so many assumptions about learning, right?
Oh, yeah, it really does. It turns things upside down.
Yeah, it draws on decades of research, cognitive psychology research, to show that a lot of the study methods we instinctively use are actually ineffective.
Like, surprisingly so.
And more importantly, it gives you evidence-based alternatives that actually lead to deeper, more lasting learning.
Okay, so let's jump right in.
Sounds good.
One of the first things they talk about in the book is this illusion of fluency.
Right.
What is that? Why is it such a trap for so many of us?
Well, think about it this way. When you reread your notes or a chapter in a textbook, and the material feels super familiar.
Yeah.
Almost like you've got it down.
Like, oh yeah, I know this.
Right. That's the illusion of fluency, and it often leads people to just rely on rereading and highlighting.
Oh, highlighting. I am so guilty of that.
Me too.
I used to highlight until the page looked like, like a rainbow explodes.
Like a Jackson Pollock painting.
Exactly. I felt like I was really absorbing everything.
It's a very common approach, yeah. But research shows that while rereading might make you familiar with the text, it doesn't necessarily mean you'll remember it later.
Right.
Or be able to actually use that knowledge.
Okay.
It creates what they call illusions of knowing. You feel like you know it because it's familiar.
Yeah.
But when you try to recall it without the text,
right.
You might draw a blank.
So all that highlighting and rereading, it's like wearing comfy slippers that don't actually help you climb a mountain.
That's a great analogy. There's actually a study in the book comparing rereading to other study methods.
Okay.
And it showed rereading had limited benefits for long-term retention, especially compared to methods that actually engage you with the material.
So passive review is basically a false sense of security.
Exactly. You might feel prepared after rereading, but that feeling can be really misleading.
Okay, this is making me rethink my whole study routine. So if rereading and highlighting aren't the heroes,
right.
Who is?
Well, the book really champions this idea of retrieval practice.
Retrieval practice. Tell us about that. How can that help?
So retrieval practice is basically trying to recall information from memory. Actively think flashcards, explaining concepts out loud, or answering practice questions.
So instead of just passively absorbing information,
right,
you're actively pulling it out.
Exactly. And that active retrieval, it's so much more effective because every time you successfully retrieve something, you strengthen the neural pathways associated with that memory.
So like
you make it more durable, easier to access later.
Like working out a muscle.
Exactly. The more you use it, the stronger it gets.
The more you can lift, the more you can remember.
Exactly. And there's this fascinating study they talk about in the book where students who practiced retrieval, they forgot significantly less information compared to students who just reread.
Wow.
And self-testing, it also acts as a diagnostic tool.
Oh, how so?
It helps you identify gaps in your knowledge.
Right.
You discover what you don't know.
Yeah.
Which then allows you to focus your studying much more effectively.
So those moments of, wait, I thought I knew this.
Right.
That's actually valuable feedback.
Exactly. And while it might feel awkward or frustrating at first, trying to recall, especially if it's new or difficult material, that struggle, it's a sign you're learning deeply.
It's supposed to be hard.
It's not meant to be easy right away.
Okay, so give us some concrete examples of how to actually use retrieval practice, like no matter what we're studying.
Sure. If you're reading a book, try to pause after each section and summarize the key points in your own words. Don't look back.
Okay, no peeking.
No peeking. For new vocabulary, use flashcards. Really try to recall the definitions, even use them in a sentence.
Mm-hmm.
If you're preparing for a presentation,
Yeah.
practice explaining the main ideas out loud without notes.
Right, right.
Even working through practice problems or old exam questions, that's great retrieval practice.
So active engagement is key. Now, another big idea for Make It Stick is spaced practice.
Right.
What's the thinking behind that? How does it work?
So spaced practice is all about reviewing materials at increasing intervals,
Okay.
instead of cramming everything in one go.
Like the night before a test.
Exactly. You spread your study sessions out. So review today,
Mm-hmm.
then again in a couple of days,
Mm-hmm.
and then maybe a week later, and then a month later. This takes advantage of something called the forgetting curve,
Oh, yes.
which basically shows how we naturally forget things over time.
Yeah.
But by revisiting the information just as you're starting to forget it,
Okay.
you force your brain to rebuild that memory, making it stronger each time.
So little and often is the way to go for long-term memory.
Exactly. Cramming might give you a temporary boost right before a test,
Right.
but those gains fade quickly.
I've definitely experienced that.
The book talks about a study with surgical residents learning microsurgery.
Okay.
The group that used spaced practice, they showed much better retention and skill application compared to the group that crammed.
Why is spacing so much more effective for the long haul? It seems counterintuitive that forgetting a bit actually helps you learn better.
Well, here's the key. Allowing some forgetting makes the retrieval process more effortful when you come back to the material.
I see.
And as we talked about with retrieval practice,
Mm-hmm.
effort strengthens memory.
Right.
It forces your brain to work harder to reconstruct that information.
Yeah, it's like I remember cramming for a test and then feeling like my brain was completely empty right after.
Exactly. It wasn't really encoded in your long-term memory. Space practice is designed to fix that.
Okay, so spacing is all about working with your brain's natural forgetting tendencies.
Precisely. Now, another concept that Make a Stick dives into is interleaving.
Interleaving. That sounded a bit weird to me at first.
Yeah, it's a little less intuitive.
Can you explain what it is and why it's so helpful?
Sure. Interleaving is about mixing up different subjects or problem types during your study session.
Okay.
So instead of spending an hour on just algebra problems,
Mm-hmm.
you might alternate between algebra, geometry, and calculus.
So jumping back and forth between topics instead of mastering one before moving on.
Exactly.
Doesn't that slow you down?
It might feel less efficient at first, yeah.
Yeah.
But research shows it actually improves your ability to differentiate between concepts
Okay.
and apply knowledge in different situations.
How so? Wouldn't focusing on one thing at a time be more effective?
When you study in blocks, you start to rely on pattern recognition. You anticipate what kind of solution is expected.
You get into a groove.
Right. But with interleaving, you're forced to analyze each problem independently
Okay.
to figure out which strategy or approach to use.
Got it.
This deepens your understanding of the underlying principles.
And makes you more adaptable.
Exactly.
The book mentioned a study with students learning geometric volume formulas.
Right.
How did interleaving play a role there?
So they had one group practice calculating volumes of different shapes,
Mm-hmm.
like wedges, spheroids, cones.
yeah.
But they did it in blocks, like all the wedge problems together, then all the spheroid problems and so on.
Okay.
The other group did the same problems, but mixed up.
Interesting.
During practice, the blocked group actually did better. They felt like they were making more progress.
The illusion of fluency strikes again.
Exactly. But on the final test, a week later,
Uh-huh.
the interleaved group blew them out of the water.
Wow.
Mixing up the problem types, even though it felt slower at first,
Right.
led to much better long-term understanding.
So your initial feeling of progress isn't always the best indicator of actual learning.
Absolutely. There's a great analogy in the book. Imagine a company training employees on a new process
Okay.
with 10 different procedures.
Mm-hmm.
Mass practice would be drilling procedure 1 until it's perfect, then moving on to procedure 2, and so on.
Okay. Got it.
Interleaving would be practicing procedure 1 a few times, then switching to procedure 4, then maybe procedure 3, and so on. Mixing it up.
Okay. Yeah.
It might feel less productive initially,
Right.
but it leads to more versatile learning in the end.
So embracing those desirable disabilities, like spacing and interleaving,
Mm-hmm.
is actually key to deeper, more durable learning, even if it doesn't feel as easy at first.
You've got it. Learning that requires more effort, that slows down your apparent progress,
Yeah.
it can actually lead to much stronger, longer-lasting retention
Okay.
and a greater ability to apply that knowledge in different situations.
So struggling a bit is a good thing.
Exactly. The book even talks about how trying to solve a problem before you've been taught the solution.
Interesting.
Even if you make mistakes,
Yeah,
can actually enhance your learning.
I wouldn't have thought that.
It primes your brain to better understand the correct solution when it's presented.
And they even mentioned this Festival of Errors in France, right?
Yes, it's a fantastic initiative inspired by this research.
Sounds amazing.
It aims to teach kids that mistakes are not failures,
Mm-hmm.
but crucial opportunities for learning and growth.
Yeah, it's about changing your mindset, right?
Exactly, seeing mistakes as stepping stones, not roadblocks.
And that ties in perfectly with the book's emphasis on mental models.
Right.
What are mental models? How do they contribute to learning?
Mental models are basically frameworks
Okay,
or representations that help us organize and understand complex information.
got it.
The book uses this great analogy of a baseball batter trying to hit a pitch.
Oh, yeah, I remember that one.
So an expert batter, they've developed mental models for different types of pitches, curveball, fastball, changeup,
Uh-huh.
based on subtle cues from the pitcher, the windup, their grip, the trajectory.
Yeah.
They then connect those models to their existing knowledge of their batting stance, the strike zone, even the game situation.
It's like a whole mental database they're drawing from.
Exactly. They process tons of information incredibly quickly and react effectively.
So it's about building these interconnected webs of knowledge in our minds.
Right. When you actively try to extract core ideas from new material and organize them into a coherent model, and crucially, connect that model to what you already know,
Yeah.
you create a much deeper, more meaningful understanding.
It's not just memorizing isolated facts.
Right.
It's about seeing how everything fits together.
Exactly. So when you're learning something new,
Mm-hmm.
try to understand the underlying principles, the overall structure.
The big picture.
Yes, not just the surface details. Always ask yourself, how does this relate to what I already know?
Right.
What are the key concepts? How do they connect?
Got it.
By building those connections, you make the information much easier to remember and use later.
Now, the book also talked about the importance of reflection.
Right.
It's not just about putting in the study hours.
Mm-hmm.
It's also about consciously thinking about how you're learning.
Exactly. Reflection is an active, incredibly valuable learning strategy.
Okay.
It's about taking time after a study session or a significant experience to review what you learned
Right.
and how you learned it.
So it's not just passively hoping some of it sticks.
Right. Reflection actively engages you in two key processes, retrieval and elaboration.
Okay, break those down for us.
Retrieval is recalling the information you learned.
Got it.
Elaboration is thinking deeper,
Okay.
making connections to other knowledge, considering a real-world applications.
So it's like taking the information and really weaving it into your existing understanding.
Precisely. The book gives the example of Mike Ebersold, a neurosurgeon who regularly reflects on his surgeries, to identify areas for improvement and refine his techniques.
Wow. High-stakes reflection there.
Absolutely. And there's the example of Mary Pat Wenderoth,
Uh-huh.
a biology professor who uses learning paragraphs.
What are those?
She asks her students to write short paragraphs reflecting on the most important things they learned each week
Okay.
and how those concepts connect to the world outside the classroom.
So it's about finding the real-world relevance.
Exactly. So after you finish a study session or learn something new, take a few minutes to ask yourself some key questions.
Like what?
What were the main points?
Mm-hmm.
How does this connect to what I already know?
Yeah.
What questions do I still have?
Okay, so reflection is all about actively processing and making meaning of what you've learned.
That's it. Now, Make It Stick also challenges a popular idea about learning styles.
Oh, like visual learners, auditory learners.
Exactly. The book suggests this might not be as critical as many believe.
Really? But I've always thought of myself as a visual learner.
I know it's a common belief, but the research doesn't strongly support the idea that tailoring instruction to specific learning styles
Yeah.
actually improves outcomes.
So those online quizzes that tell you what kind of learner you are,
Right.
they might not be that accurate.
While you might have preferences, learning is actually enhanced by engaging multiple senses and cognitive resources.
So going wide, as they say in the book.
Exactly. Interact with the material in different ways. Don't limit yourself to one perceived style.
So even if I prefer visuals, I shouldn't just rely on diagrams and charts.
Right. Engage with the text. Explain concepts verbally.
Mix it up.
Exactly. Engaging multiple pathways strengthens memory and understanding.
Now, the book did mention structure building as a cognitive difference that does impact learning.
That's right.
What's that about?
Structure building refers to your ability to extract core ideas and organize them into a mental framework.
So it's not about the sensory modality.
Mm-hmm.
It's about how you process and organize information.
Exactly. And finally, Make It Stick really emphasizes calibration and metacognition.
Those sound pretty complex.
They might, but they're actually quite straightforward.
Okay, break them down for us.
Calibration is about checking your understanding against objective feedback, like tests or quizzes.
Ah, so it's about making sure you're not overconfident in what you think you know.
Exactly. We can all be susceptible to illusions of competence, thinking we've mastered something just because it's familiar.
Yeah, yeah.
Regular self-testing and feedback help clear away those illusions.
So those quizzes that sometimes feel like a chore,
Right.
they're actually serving an important purpose.
They're invaluable. They help you calibrate your understanding and pinpoint areas that need more work.
And metacognition, what's that about?
Metacognition is thinking about your thinking, being aware of how well you actually understand something,
Okay.
monitoring your comprehension, evaluating your progress, adjusting your learning techniques.
It's about being honest with yourself about what you know and what you still need to learn.
Precisely. And that self-awareness allows you to take control of your learning.
And make more informed decisions about how to study.
Right. Now, one of the most encouraging things about Make It Stick is seeing how these principles are applied in the real world.
Oh yeah, the book was full of amazing examples.
From pilot training to medical schools
Yeah.
to sports teams,
Uh-huh.
retrieval practice, spaced repetition, interleaving, they've all shown amazing results in diverse fields.
And the story of Andrew Young, the medical student who dramatically improved his grades
Right.
by using these strategies.
So inspiring.
And James Patterson, the author who uses mnemonic devices like memory palaces
Yes.
to memorize huge amounts of information.
It just shows the power of creating mental structures for effective retrieval.
It's all about working smarter, not just harder.
Absolutely. And that's where University 365 comes in, right?
Oh yeah. Hearing all these insights from Make It Stick, it's clear that University 365 is built on these same principles.
Exactly.
The structured content, the opportunities for practice, the self-assessment tools.
Right.
It's all designed to help you learn more deeply and retain more information.
University 365 empowers you to take control, to move beyond passive learning and actively engage in strategies that actually work.
It's about equipping you with the knowledge and tools to learn more effectively and efficiently.
And to achieve your full potential.
So to recap for our listeners, some key takeaways. Retrieval practice, spaced repetition, and embracing those desirable difficulties.
Remember, effective learning often involves effort, active engagement, even a bit of struggle. Don't let those initial feelings fool you.
So think back to a time you felt really confident about something you learned. Did your study methods align with what we've talked about today?
Good question.
What small change could you make that would make a big difference in the long run?
It's worth reflecting on.
We encourage you to explore Make It Stick further.
Yes, it's a fantastic resource.
And to consider how University 365 can support your learning journey.
We're here to help you learn smarter.
Anna, thank you so much for sharing your expertise. This has been truly inspiring.
My pleasure. It's been wonderful talking with you and sharing these insights with everyone listening.
And to all of you listening, keep learning, keep growing, and most importantly, keep making it stick.
Absolutely.
That's it for today's deep dive. We'll see you next time.
Bye, everyone.